Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Main Event, the history of the Champions League here on Heart and Hand. I am Martin in the chair as always as we reach the denouement of season 03-04 and the birth of the special one. I'm joined by a couple of special ones myself as I am every week. Adam Thornton is here to break down a new dimension perhaps in football tactical evolution with this particular manager and this particular team and a lot more besides. How are we doing, Adam?
Good, thank you. Yeah, it definitely is a new dimension. Like we said at the start of this season 2 weeks ago, it's the modern age as far as I'm concerned. Lots of things that we talk about here will be prevalent for definitely the next 10, maybe even 15 years. So yeah, good to set the scene. Hopefully we can do it justice.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Davey's here. How are we doing?
Oh, great. I mean, I'm an unabashed Jose fanboy. Always have been, always will be. So we're just entering my era here. All the stuff that Adam's going to hate in the next few weeks, I'm just going to be sitting spooning up, going more, because I from the first I clapped eyes on him holding aloft that UEFA Cup, a love affair was born that has not ended yet, and all the shithouse, all the the nonsense that went along with him. I just think the guy has been such a fantastic figure of entertainment, and that's even before you get into, for a while he was genuinely, undisputably the greatest football manager walking the earth.
And next week we're doing 2010 straight there, nothing in between. Tarantino narrative. Let's take care of Porto then first, because they kind of take care of business again pretty cleanly. Adam, Mourinho's perfect result at home, first leg, European double tie, 0-0, no away goal, which means we can go there and, if we score, we probably win the game. Well, that's all we needed to do, and that's exactly what happened. A penalty, it was all that was required. Tight cages, all hell, but these are semi-finals and they just need to be won, and Porto go through without any drama. We'll save all that for the other semi-final. How's he doing this? What does this team look like, and why is it different?
So yeah, how is he doing it as a concept which is called tactical periodization? Now, a lot of people probably think of Mourinho as reactive, counter-attacking, all that sort of stuff. It's not really the case early doors. He becomes that. You sort of mentioned there, maybe with the players he had at his disposal at Inter, maybe going to Italian football and therefore doing what needs to be done in that league, and then taking that on to Real Madrid, which obviously we'll come on to in however many weeks. But at the start, I mean, this season and the next couple of seasons at Chelsea, he's not that guy. He has a clear plan, he has a clear system, but it all comes back down to this tactical periodization piece. Now, it's quite academic. I'll try and, if I can make sense of the academic parts, I'll try my best to explain it. But it's predominantly
it's Portuguese, isn't it, Adam?
Yeah. So definitely. So all the good Portuguese managers that you can remember, or certainly all the famous ones, Andres Villas-Boas, Nuno Espirito Santo, Paulo Fonseca, not Portuguese per se, but influenced from it, and Brendan Rodgers as well from his time at Chelsea working under Mourinho is probably the only sort of outlier of it. So what it tries to achieve, I guess, is it tries to marry together the technical aspect of training, the physical aspect of being an athlete, and then the psychological aspect of trying to be a winner at the elite level. It sort of bundles it all together into tactical training sessions, and the tactics are the key part of it. They try to do all of that. You'll see some managers, I guess, talking about shape work on one day, and then it'll be the bleep test on the next day, and then it'll be talking about how we're going to approach the game. That's not quite what this is. This is all about doing it all at the same time. There's a whole lot of things that feed into it that I don't know huge amounts about, I'm going to be honest, but they all feed into it. Things like chaos theory of complexity, fractal geometry. There's a lot of science in it. And Mourinho was big on systems theory, sociological stuff, neuroscience, all these things that sort of come together. And basically what it's about is designing the training in a perfect cycle that keeps the athletes in their optimum position, or their optimum condition. Doing the small things regularly on this day, every day, to build themselves up to a game at a Saturday, for example. Training, they try to make training reflect the in-game scenarios, so nothing like rondos or anything like that, or quick combinations going through and nobody's marking you. It's more defined on how do we defend as a team, how do we attack as a team on this day, how do we counter-attack, all that sort of stuff. So it trains them all together in the one period. Do you remember, I've blocked it out of my memory, but do you remember, so Caixinha was a proponent of this as well?
Yes, he was hugely, yeah.
Just wasn't very good at it. But do you remember him talking about the differences between 4 days between a game, or 3 days between a game, 4 days between a game, all that sort of stuff about it really interrupts the rhythm? It's because of this. You need to have the same amount of time between each game because you do the same thing. There's 4 or 5 days. What do I do on game day -1, game day -2, game day -3? It's all in a bit of a routine. So when it is Thursday to Sunday and then maybe Wednesday to Saturday, it messes up the equilibrium a little bit, which is not ideal when you've got so many games. So I guess it all comes back to having a plan and a strategy, how best to implement it on the pitch. Mourinho is the absolute master of it. It's all about 4 phases of the game, I guess. Training geared to knowing what to do in each of the 4 phases. So that's how we attack, like I said, how we defend, but then also how we transition to defending and how we transition to attack. So how we deal with a team counter-attacking us and how we deal with counter-attacking a team. That's the 4 main pieces that they work towards. So to give it some examples, you can sort of start to tailor it. If you're an attacker, for example, let's take Derley in this Porto team. You need to do something specific when the team wins the ball back. Mourinho has a task for you to do when the team wins the ball back, and they're looking to transition to attack and hit on the counter like they do very well. That thing that he asks you to do is probably different to when the team are defending, and maybe even different to when the team are attacking with possession deep in their own half. When they're transitioning to attack, maybe Derley stretches play, stays on the halfway line, stretches play wide. In defence, maybe he is on the halfway line just waiting for that counter on the ball over the top. And then when you're actually countering, you'll be sort of running off the defender's shoulder, if you like, ready for a ball. So 4 different things that might happen on 4 different days, depending on which aspect of the game that you're training. So it works because it keeps the tactical principles as the main thing, and everything else is then based off of that. Players know what to do in each situation. They're physically capable of doing it, and he's got inside their heads to make sure they're psychologically capable of doing what they need to do in these key moments. The idea about it is it minimises the surprises in the game because he's given each player the 4 key situations within a game. He's given each player an individual, meticulous plan, what to do. Wrapped around that is this new thing at this stage, certainly in 2004, of opposition analysis, which Mourinho has. I mean, I don't want to. I could go on for about 10-15 minutes here, but
that was his thing, right? That's where he started at Barcelona. Well, the interpreter, but then he started noticing that he could do those things. But here's sorry to interrupt. I've just got questions busting for you because this is a really abstract and academic concept, right? So what you you need a footballing culture that absorbs it, and Portugal seems to do that just because of the way that it's structured in the schedule that you mentioned, right? And Scotland probably doesn't. For
Govan was not. No.
You also need players who they have football intelligence to be able to take it in And the Pedro example, I think, is quite good for two reasons. He's dealing with players like Josh Windass, who's still struggling with the riddle, what gets wetter as it dries, right? How is he taking on that administered by anybody? But then you still, because it's so dry, Adam, and again, football's not really inhabiting the famous chair on Mastermind too often, you have to be able to sell it. And Mourinho can sell anything at this stage where Pedro couldn't. And where André Villas-Boas struggled, because he was just the wee dweeb who did all this incredible analysis of Colchester or whoever it was that Chelsea were playing the FA Cup. It was not needed. But that he struggled to sell it, struggled to communicate, and you need a bit of both, because part of Mourinho's shtick here, I think he played on it quite a lot with Porto this season or the season before. Big game against Benfica. We're going to get a man sent off here. We're going to Lisbon. We will have a man sent off. This referee's bent. So we're just preparing for that. And the players knew exactly who it would be and knew exactly what to do. Chelsea walks in the building. We're going to win the title this year. We're going to win the title on April 23rd against Bolton away from home. And they did. And all of a sudden, you're just, this guy, whatever he says, you do, because he's almost like Merlin. So it's that thing, Ryan. You need players who are receptive, but you need to be a communicator.
Yeah, and everyone else that you can think about that's tried to do it has fallen down on that aspect. The communicator, psychological side, if you like. Andrés Villas-Boas didn't have it. Pedro Caixinha absolutely didn't have it. Nuno Espirito Santo doesn't really have it. You need that. The base is fine. You can learn the theory. Everybody can learn the theory of anything, but the key skill is being big enough character that people are going to want to follow you, first of all, but also translating that into what a footballer understands, showing the benefits of that to a footballer. So many of those other players other managers couldn't do it. But yeah, I guess the interesting origins of it is the guy who basically invented it, if you like, was a Portuguese academic sports scientist. He was at University of Porto, and then he began working at Porto during Bobby Robson's time there, and obviously Mourinho being there as translator, etc., sort of started to get involved in it. So it's a really, really interesting concept, and it's not something that I think is spoken about hugely in terms of Mourinho. It's maybe not something that it gets, for the latter half of his career, he probably gets that disservice of not necessarily being tactical, and I'm guilty of this as well. I think about tactics in the attacking sense of it rather than the defending sense of it, and I guess things have moved on a little bit from this period we're talking about, and most people probably think about that now, but everything that Mourinho does is tactics. It's all about getting the better of a team as a manager, getting the better of an opposition, which is really what tactics comes down to. So there is positive and negative tactics, if you like, and he the master of it. Yeah,
I mean, Porto are going to demonstrate, I suppose, both sides of that. I think Chelsea, his whole career gets forgotten, or the early part gets forgotten a wee bit. I mean, he invented the park and the bus, but he was complaining that Spurs did it. Spurs did it against Chelsea. They drew 0-0 in a Saturday tea time league game, and he complained that we came to win and Chelsea came to park the bus. Spurs came to park the bus, and then obviously that comes back to kind of define him. Just before I let David talk about this particular Porto team before the final, where does someone like Deco fit in? Very clever, very skillful, very kind of full of invention, but again, jobs to do, work to do. Where does he fit into that particular, or guys like Alaniachev maybe later on in a game?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because, again, there's an evolution piece here with this team. When he joins them in 2002, he sort of cobbles together a bit of a team that first summer. He gets Paulo Freire and he gets Nuno Valente, Manish Derley, Nuno Espirito Santo comes back as backup goalkeeper, which is not something that I was hugely aware of. You've got guys there already, like you mentioned, who are huge players for them. Ricardo Carvalho, Deco, Costinha, I think, is there. So they have maybe things that he didn't have later, or things that he didn't think he needed later. That maybe that streak of individualism, or people that don't have the athleticism that some other players have. That's maybe be interesting to chart how that goes for him, and he values the sort of physical defensive side more, because I mean, Deco's Deco, and he's always a great player, but Mourinho doesn't have a massively good reputation from end of Madrid onwards to dealing with like kind of floaty number 10 type players. But yeah, he was a key part of it. Alinachev was always he scores a lot of important goals in this run, but Alinachev was always for me a little bit of a wild card here. We can go on and talk about the actual formation and obviously the system, etc., that they use here, but I think that's the interesting part of it. And you see it at Chelsea in his first season or two as well. It's pretty similar to what they have here. Maybe he kind of drops a striker and goes with the two wingers, but it's kind of broadly similar to what he has here. It's when he moves forward a little bit, he maybe starts to value other things. But yeah, Deco, that core that were there, Vita Bayer, Ricardo Carvalho, Castilla, Deco, were all there before, and they were all vital parts of it. But the evolution part was interesting. The summer 2003, Benny McCarthy, Jose Basinga, Sergio Conceição, of course, Pedro Mendes all come in as well. So there's a team building element there as well, and it sort of gets us to this point that we're talking about now. So they're all crucial players. There's nobody, he doesn't fall out with anybody particularly at this time. He has bounced about quite a lot of Portuguese teams at this point. Benfica manager for a bit, obviously Sporting Lisbon with Robson and Porto with Robson and back at Porto. So he's obviously got quite a bit of standing and sway there, that they're all happy to run through a brick wall for him. Obviously this is the kind of start of that Portuguese golden generation type piece as well, but there's an element of luck there as well, that you're getting some of these players coming through and they're available before really you're getting to the points where Portuguese players are really properly starting to move to England, and things that's not really happening there, so they are inclined to stay a little bit longer. So there's all sorts of perfect storm stuff going on.
Davey, Adam's broken down perfectly just how this is happening at Porto. Something you and I can get on board with. When Mourinho dresses well, things go very well indeed. When he looks utterly shabby, there's trouble afoot. That season, that final disastrous season at Chelsea, I don't know what he was rocking up to the Charity Shield with, or the first day of the season. It was not good. I love that Inter blazer with the always wore that sky blue shirt underneath. It's basic science.
Yes, it is. Yes, and some people might mock us for that, Martin. Could you believe it?
Well, I mean, it's one or the other, right? I mean, who knows? Who knows what worked on? Who knows what worked on the day?
A wonderful graphic around about the time that had the difference between soccer coaches and US football coaches. And it had, Mourinho there in the scarf and the 10 grand overcoat, Wenger in the suit, and then it cut to all these Americans that are the size of a house wearing sportswear. But a couple of players I want to pick out from this side, if I may, if I can be so bold. Deco is the obvious one, but he really was good, wasn't he? I mean, he was just an absolutely terrific footballer. Imperious, can I dust that down? A guy who played his own game and not really troubled by what the opposition did. Maniche, I think, underrated cog in that machine. And then somebody, and you and I have come across this before, not really understanding why, Ricardo Carvalho not being mentioned as not the best centre-half that ever played in the English Premiership, but he's in the top 10. He was a magnificent centre-back. Absolutely. He actually reminded me of Laurent Blanc before his legs went. Just that ability to be everywhere, lead everything with a minimum of fuss, so that you didn't really notice him, and then you realised that the guy he was up against hadn't actually kicked the ball for the preceding hour and a half of football. He would be a stats guy, a stats geek's absolute hero, Adam, because his amount of duels won must have been, because I don't recall him losing any.
I know
brilliant.
the prevailing wisdom is that Vidic and Rio were the Premier League's best centre-back pair. Now, I don't like John Terry, not many people do, but it's still Terry Carvalho for me, and that's because of Ricky, probably. Anyway,
Colin McMillan, famously not a fan of Ricardo Carvalho.
Yeah,
overrated.
That was when it came up. He said he's overrated, and we sort of asked him to explain it. And because he'd obviously just read it somewhere once with it fully taken it in, he didn't have the ability to do so. It's fine, listeners. He'll never listen to this. It's a bit football.
I was going to say we can slaughter the life out of him. He's absolutely not listening to the depths.
Never ever going to listen.
He's been up for his holiday.
No, that's it. But Carvalho was, I think, quite typical of this side. Even guys that they would use off the bench this season, Sergio Conceição, who goes on to be, a terrific footballer, he was coming off the bench this season. They had options. Castagna, who we mentioned last week because of Old Trafford, they were just packed with good footballers. And there is something that I love about a side, particularly not from a top 5 league, because you can do it here. It's increasingly difficult in the modern age to have a side this good that has played together for 2 years, and they all know. Adam's just explained it's set up deliberately that way, that they all know what their job is and what their mate's supposed to do at any given point, and the day that they're going to be doing it and what time. But you wouldn't get this now, because after the UEFA Cup, when this side gets broken up, instead it gets that second year and everything is just fit together perfectly. There's a beautiful geometry to this Porto side.
Certainly is, as if it was put together on purpose. Chaos still afoot in the Champions League in that other semi-final. Davy, Chelsea Monaco, or Monaco Chelsea in the first leg. I was really excited about this, as I was kind of talking, I think, last week. I could really fancy Chelsea, and again, the only team that you maybe kind of root for. Don't really have any feelings about Monaco or Deportivo. Slight fondness for Porto for what they did for us the season before, but I really fancied this one, Davey. And I was at Ricky Gervais Politics show, his first stand-up tour, I think, and I didn't have access to what was going on, and I was so disappointed to come out to find that Chelsea had lost 3-1. Match quite evenly balanced for a while. Pusso again and Crespo, but then 2 goals in the last 12 minutes. Morientes again, and Nonda adding a third. Looked like it would turn out that way. That this was the absolute killer blow. Chelsea were up against it, shall we say, for the second leg.
Yeah, they definitely were, although we're going to get to that second leg in a minute. But the Shabani Nonda was a really wonderful player. He couldn't stay fit, unfortunately. Curse of certain players through the ages. Quick players, of course, Martin, physical, powerful players ask a lot of their bodies, and Shabani Nonda was that. But he wasn't quite as physical as Drogba, but he was quicker, if you like. But he was in that category of strikers, I think. And they had a very powerful forward line, because, these 3 that score that night, every one of them is terrific in the air. Morientes was brilliant in the air, number as he showed in his time at Liverpool. But this is very evenly matched, and it could go either way. I think a year later, Chelsea win this because they shut up shop at 1-1 and take them back to the bridge and do it. But they can't quite do that. Yeah, job's done. Yeah, and they're quite happy, but they can't quite do that here. The killer goal is the third, and you could sort of sense that feeling of, oh, this is different, because 2-1 is absolutely not a terrible result in the era of away goals to take back. And I would have fancied Chelsea strongly. That third, once Chelsea get that goal, 3 you think is the minimum that Monaco need, right enough. So it's still up in
Mm.
the air, but it's just a completely different complexion on it. And yeah, I was surprised because, look, I think you looked at the Monaco team and there were names in it that were new to us, but they had such an exciting, consistent season. Dado's, he's made his name this season, the Champions League. Nonda had been highly rated. And we've spoken on the show before about when a young player was getting talked about in France in this era, we were all going, ooh, because it just seemed to be this conveyor belt. And then the next joke would be, I wonder when he goes to Arsenal. But, that it was a sense that France was producing these wonderful footballers. Julie, that we've spoken about. But you still thought Chelsea had enough. You look at the superstar names in that side, but this last 15 minutes kills them. Even at 2-1, just you cannot lose another. You've got to get out of there no worse than 2-1. And the third one would turn it to be pivotal.
Yeah, I'll come back to it in a minute. I'll come back to it with Adam, but Davey, we can't ignore the fact that this wasn't really the story that week.
No.
ITV were showing the game live. Ron Atkinson, a staple of the co-commentary position with Clive Tildesley, talking after it. ITV no longer broadcasting, but comments picked up on another feed. I think it was going to Dubai, Egypt, that territory. And Atkinson's criticism of Marcel Desailly that night, which there's really no excusing. There's no defense of it. He was very quick to resign that week. Look it up if you want to know the verbatim. I'm certainly not repeating on here. I quite like to keep doing these pods, even though quotation marks means you can. It's a Guardian thing.
No, I'd still prefer you didn't.
Yeah, so we won't do it. But it was a huge shock because Big Ron had been a fixture of that particular role for some time, and that was that. I mean, his time is done. There's no grace period, and go and lick your wounds and repent. It pretty much over.
No, he was completely done after it. Which, for those of you who don't know, should tell you the word he used is the absolute one that you just cannot use. And Ron Atkinson, I think, is a good example. And people spoke about a generational thing, and there's a degree of truth to that. I think we've all had older relatives who use terms that we would consider absolutely unacceptable without really thinking them through. But Ron Atkinson had worked in the media for 30 years by this point.
Yeah.
So there's zero doubt. Ron Atkinson, I think, is an example of somebody who, believe it or not, would not act in what you might perceive a racist way. He famously brought through a number of black footballs at West Brom. He brought through Brendan Batson, Cyril Regis, Laurie Cunningham. And this was at a time when black players didn't always get a start in football because of colour. So, but he thought it was acceptable to use this sort of language. The fact that he's saying it to a co-worker in Clive Tildesley suggests that he was comfortable using that sort of language. And you're right,
it would have been normal.
Yeah, it was similar to what happened to Andy Gray. It was the fact that clearly it was normalised. But at the end of the day, Ron's time, I think, was passing anyway. He was known as for his own lexicon. There was a website dedicated to it called Wronglish. Backstick. He went down like Buddy Holly was one of his favourites for a player who had dived, and he was a sort of relic of a bygone age, even for this point. And at the time, Hansen and Lawrenson are still on. They're not relics of bygone age at this point because they're not, but he is. He was a guy from the 70s, and he was using language that he clearly thought was okay. It wasn't, and there was no way back from ITV. Couldn't have him back after that. You can't use that word. But again, it's a changing, of the guard. Things are moving on. Now he has set fire to himself, but I think they would have been having to take him to live on a farm pretty soon anyway, because football is hitting this. You know, Ron was your type of guy who would, we know that the Italians will be good defensively. Well, Ron, they've shipped, 60 goals domestic this season. Oh, well, obviously, he hasn't watched them or done any stats on them. And to be honest, it's only really in the last 10 years, I would argue, in Britain, last 15, post-2010, that punditry in Britain has evolved past that, where it was considered perfectly acceptable for people to turn up on TV who knew nothing at all about one of the teams playing and just pass comment on it. And I think with the growth of sites such as ours, shows such as this, the internet, etc., the freedom our fans have to watch football from other leagues, that doesn't cut it anymore. It's lazy and it's pathetic to just turn up and say, oh, well, the Italians will be good defensively, or,
Yeah.
Do your job. You've been paid for this. Do your job.
The second leg, Adam, Davies, we said there 3-1 kind of does it. At one point, it looked, actually, no, Chelsea are absolutely banging this. Gronka with a fantastic goal at the top corner. And then Lampard through and goal does what Lampard does. His timing runs perfectly. What I forgot to mention with the Wayne Bridge goal at Arsenal is the role of Johnson. He's such a brilliant link player, such a clever pass that night. Clever pass, I think I'm sure it's him that feeds Lampard in. And Chelsea are 2-0 up right before half time. So ahead in the tie because of a away goal. But then Ibarra scores in injury time right before half time. Yeah. The most ridiculous goal imaginable. Scruffy doesn't do it justice, but it's so weird, kind of looping head on that the back stick, as Big Ron would have said if he wasn't
hadn't been fired, yeah.
And he kind of hits off him from like 10 centimeters, and that momentum is killed. And of course, Morientes scores to finish all that as a contest in the second half. But there was life in this tie.
Yeah, there was. I think that Ibarra goal potentially wouldn't stand now. I think it's a wee bit of a handball in that as well. Yeah. So right before half time, you got that grievance factor, psychological, like we said. Interesting. Monaco stuff, like we said, because you reeled off those strikers. You've got Emmanuel Adebayor as well having his breakthrough season this season for Monaco. So they've got 4 proper number 9s. So maybe it's no surprise that they're scoring the goals, and maybe it's something to dig into with Didier Deschamps, whose managerial career I've pretty much overlooked. But maybe it's an interesting one because they were very attacking. They scored a huge amount of goals in this game, like this season. Sorry, it was like 45 goals or something they scored throughout, which is mad. Really, really solid team. Again, we've spoken about all the Rangers players. So Julian Rodriguez comes in as well, doesn't he? For playing for them, Pedro Mendes as well. This final defines Rangers over the next wee while for good and bad, probably. But yeah, really, really interesting. Really interesting team. Julie going to Barcelona, Rothen, who was rapid at watching these games back. I know it's only 4 or 5 years later for us, but how players can lose that amount of pace, I think, is mad. Because he was jet healed, to use a cliche, compared to what we got. So yeah, really,
you don't get enough jet healed these days, Adam. Thank you for bringing that back.
Certainly not for Jerome Rothen.
No, you didn't. No. That's where I broke.
The jet healed. What's the French one? It's Dutch cracks. I don't know what the French one is, but jet healed French something. But yeah, another great game. To be honest, looking back over this has been fantastic for the amount of goals that are scored. The jeopardy. I know you're a big jeopardy man, Martin. There's lots of that here. There's if this happened. If this didn't happen, or this away goal went in, or this, then things could be so different, which is great when you've also got loads of games as well, like you mentioned, 7-0s, 4-0s, 8-3s, but having all that jeopardy involved as well has been really good to see. And yeah, it's it's maybe not the final that anybody thought. Like I said, they were rank outsiders for it, but you couldn't argue, I think, that both teams, I mean, the highest scoring team in Monaco, and then the team who were seemingly on a bit of a crest of a wave and peaking at the right moment and doing all the sensible things, getting to the final. You probably couldn't argue about it when you sit down and track it through as we've done.
I love the game show as well, by the way, Jeopardy. One of my favourites. Just before we get to the final, Adam, we talked about all these number 9s. Drogba is having a great season at Marseille. Much to Mr. Edgar's delight, there's the return of the target man here, no? The big man, the big 9.
Mm-hmm.
There definitely is, and I think this is a I guess a point from having this extra attacker. Now we think wasn't so long ago we were talking about back threes being in vogue, and okay, you've got the 2 players up front, big man, little man there, but what you're seeing now is, depending on the number 10, they're kind of dropping deeper to form a sort of box in midfield, or they're basically a third or fourth attacker. So I think I mentioned it with Pandiani. You're seeing a lot. You're still seeing quite a bit of direct play, but you're seeing a lot more knockdowns and things coming back into the second balls rather than crosses being swung in for Mark Hateley to score loads of headers, or Alan Shearer to score loads of headers. You're seeing the target man being used in a different way tactically. They're the big guy up there who will bring the ball down and score themselves, or they'll bring it down and then they've got a couple of little players buzzing around them. You might have Deco right there to pick it up, or you might have one of the wingers coming in, or there's just quite a lot of interplay with it. So although it can be quite direct with that target man, they're sort of being used in a slightly more nuanced way. But yeah, definitely seems to be the case at this point.
The final then in Gelsenkirchen, with the roof as a possibility if it was ever needed, built for the upcoming World Cup in Germany 2 years later. These teams then, Big Dado on the bench here tonight. Roman goal, who was superb against Chelsea at the Bridge. Ibarra, Julian Rodriguez, you said, Adam, Gail Givet, and a young Patrice Evra. Cisse, Bernardi, Zikos, Ludovic Gillet, of course, the captain, Jerome Roth, and leading the line, Fernando Morientes. Porto trips off the tongue pretty nicely, doesn't it? Vitor Baia, Paulo Ferreira, whom I love, George Costa, the captain, Ricky Carvalho, Nuni Valente, Pedro Mendes, Cristina Maniche, and then Deco, Carlos Alberto, and Derley. You have Eliane Achev and Benny McCarthy to come on, and indeed they did. Turning point in the game, the substitution then of Gilly for Dado, 23 minutes. Such a huge player for Monaco, Adam, such a clever player, creative player, captain, and sometimes you get these finals just defined by that.
Yeah, I think it maybe exacerbated the main issue for Monaco in this game. I mean, you reeled off those players there. Defence were all pretty good. Flavio Roma maybe a little bit scatty, but still a decent enough keeper, and then a really good front three. But that Monaco midfield three up against Porto's midfield 3 or 4 is a bit of a mismatch. You then take off Julie, who'll drop deep, do tracking back, all that sort of stuff, and sort of help them out for Purcell, which he probably much more. I mean, we've seen him a year later. Pace he did not have. So there's not going to be much tracking back there. So yeah, I think that what was already maybe slightly imbalanced in Porto's favour just sort of got blown apart from that, which is a shame. But yeah, Porto, I guess they lined up. This is the change, I think, for Mourinho. They did have a front two at this point. It was 4-3-1-2. Huge onus on the fullbacks to give width and that type of system, like we've seen. The same sort of, and this is again what's really interesting about these things, is the same sort of setup as Milan the year before. Really, the sort of makings of the Milan Christmas tree formation before they would then pull a player back for the 2007 final. So something similar there, but I'm not sure when you think about it as Jose Mourinho's Porto against Carlo Ancelotti's Milan, you would think they were quite similar, but they sort of were set up in the same way. That Valenti-Ferreira combination is great because one goes and one stays. Ferreira was later on less dynamic, obviously, as you would be, but still more than capable of getting forwards in these early years. So that was a pretty good dynamic. The midfield three, just Manish, Costinha and Pedro Mendes, just strong base. Nothing fancy. Win the ball, get it forward to the front three, get it wide to the fullbacks. Rare occasions you'd have Pedro Mendes hitting the box to be an additional man. More often than not, it'd be Manish, but they were the two guys that were running. We mentioned Ricardo Carvalho, absolutely perfect for this type of system because not only was he terrific one-on-one, terrific in the air, but the balls he could ping out wide for Derley to peel off to the side or knock it down for Manish running through. It was all, unsurprisingly, very well set up and very well thought out. And then, you mentioned Deco key in the attack, which was really, really helpful. Carlos Alberto, maybe one that is probably worth highlighting. Really nice goal in this final and pretty much peaked here. I don't think he ever really hit these.
To be fair, he must have been some age when you think about that goal he got for Brazil in 1970, which one of the best goals of all time. 34 years later, he's still give him a break for fuck's sake, Adam.
Seems to only look like he's 19, which is mad.
Right. Well, it's the sunny climate in the Mediterranean diet.
It's a lovely goal though, Adam. He scored in the first half. Monaco chasing, but it's running at the brick wall, and the two Porto goals later on. I mean, there's hardly anybody in defence. They're just absolutely stretched. Deco, well worth his goal. Alenichev had come on, who scored, of course, in the UEFA Cup final the season before. Doesn't fuck about with his strike. I think it's fair to say. Nearly takes the net away. Such as the kind of confidence, and it's easy to forget now because he's such a kind of cartoon character now, Mourinho. But he was like a shaman at that point. Those players believed everything that he told them that they were going to win. It wasn't a contest. It wasn't up for debate. And that I think because Alenichev's a sub, right? Not really on that long, and to utterly leather it, to obviously absolutely make sure there's just no doubt in that team that they're going to win that game. And there's probably not a lot of doubt in their opponents either.
No, I don't think so. I absolutely agree with that sentiment. I think Monaco hope they're going to win. I think Porto turned up there and they knew they were going to win. I like that you highlighted Alenichev's finish as an almost totem of this performance, because it is in a way, isn't it? It's the full stop. It's the icing on the cake. It's just, this is done, and look, we are superior to them. We are a better side than them. This is a team whose belief in their manager, yes, but in each other was total. They knew they had special players, and I think there's always a sense certainly from 1-0 that Monaco are sort of pushing uphill a little bit, and that control of the game lies with Porto. And that third goal was the game's done it too, I would argue. You can say, I suppose, it's the next one, but I think everyone in the ground knows. And the third one is, as I say, just the exclamation mark that says, look, we are by far. And you're right, the photograph of him after the game, again in the suit, looking $1 million, with his stubble. And here was a guy who, he just looked like, in football, there are no undiscovered geniuses, the way there are in art or music or whatever. In football, everybody gets scouted or watched and noted by big clubs. And here was this guy who's just won two, 1 year won the UEFA Cup, next year went and won its big sister. And you just thought, we're witnessing here somebody incredibly special who is already at the top of the game, but you just felt was at the start of
that's the juxtaposition that I felt that this. and Porto fans, right? I mean, it's not the first big one. They'd won in '87 or whatever, and what a night it must be. They must already know he's going. Half the team are going. Some of whom with the manager. We better enjoy this as it comes. But Davey, I remember watching this guy on what must be the pinnacle of his career thus far, obviously. But he was treating it. Now it's all show, right? But I love the fact that you've got someone in football who is showbiz. It's not an ex-player that's turned manager. This guy is treating this as if something he knew about. He was, this has been done. I was never losing this. No big deal. No big drama. It's just another thing. I'm moving on to something else and chucking the medal away and looking miserable on this crowning achievement. Contrast, of course, the Old Trafford night and all of that. It just someone in total control, but just at the start is exactly the juxtaposition, Davey. This guy is just a new manager, yet he looks like this is his fourth Champions League in 20 years. This is the kind of thing he just does. And you know what, lads? I've seen things and I've got perspective because I've had bad days, and it's just a game. This was showbiz, and I was bought in. So if I wasn't the year before, I was that night because he just looked above it, Adam. Like this. This mere trivial Wednesday night that he was having in Germany.
I think it's all the more fascinating. I mean, we talk about Carlo Ancelotti now, or Mourinho now being unfazed or nonplussed about it because they've done everything. But I just think arriving like that, like you mentioned, obviously,
yes,
we know he's been involved in football for years. We know his dad was a manager at Rio Ave when Mourinho came through, and he used to get him to do the opposition scouting reports, even though he's never going to make it as a proper professional footballer. He would be doing the opposition scouting reports back in the early mid-80s, so kind of always been exposed to it, but then falls out of it, goes to be a PE teacher for a bit, comes and does the coaching badges at Largs and things. But it's Robson wants somebody who is a coach of some level, but also can speak good English, which is always fascinating me because I would not say that Mourinho's English was stellar. Even now, like I think that's sometimes part of the charm. Like when he came in, he says, "I think I am a special one," and it's like a really weird way of saying it. So it's interesting. I guess Bobby Robson probably as a Geordie maybe didn't have the greatest handle on English as well. But I always found that quite interesting. But he did bounce about some big clubs there. Like he had that relationship with Robson and Van Gaal.
Oh yeah,
to know the players, being one of them, all that sort of stuff that we know about. But I just think it's really fascinating where he fails quite a few times, and he's done this and he's done that. There's no what's the word, hesitation, no inferiority complex in the way that Saki used to have the inferiority complex as well at points, and it was about trying to prove himself. There's none of that. There's no I need to prove myself because I've not had a career, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. It's just that's like I think it's definitely the psychological aspect of it for me. The whole having the basis there with that sort of tactical theory, tactical framework, but it's that personality, being that guy, being so bullish, being so in awe of your own ability, basically.
He's zeitgeist, and he knows it. And that's the thing. This is his moment, and it reminds me of music when a band turns up with an album and they just drop it and they stand back and go, right, we're going to be huge, because they know, like Oasis did or Nirvana did, or where it's just, we've produced this thing, we are that good, we know it. And as you say, Adam, they arrive looking like, well, of course we're here, because why would we not be? He had that, and he carried himself like that. The other thing is, Martin, just to a deeper point you made, which was about the star quality and a bit, if you like, movie star. Yeah. This level of football, this elite level of football, sells itself on glamour. And even this week, as we record, there's the debate about Aston Villa's ticket prices, right? Because it's their first time in it and they're charging outrageous sums. You get charged to watch this, a subscription, right? Even to watch it at home. You get charged ridiculous monies to attend it, theatre prices to attend it. It should have this. I don't want to see some fucker in a tracksuit who's standing there going, "Oh, we'll with their hands behind the back." Some wee guy like going, "Oh, we hope to do well for the football club." Fuck that. That's not what this is. That's not what this should be. This is to be the elite thing that makes people fall in love with it, that the whole world watches. And Mourinho grasped that and was not only somebody who was prepared to act on that stage. He was somebody who commanded that stage and wanted it. Now, Ancelotti does it, but in a completely different way, in the same way that there are actors who are over the top and actors who are laid back and charismatic. There's no one way to do it. I'm not saying everybody should be like Jose Mourinho. It would be a pretty boring world if they were. But you do need people who grasp this and who want to do it. Klopp, Pep, they all do it. Same thing. It's that certainty, that knowledge, that personality that at times makes them look like a bit of a dick, right? But you need all that. Every ingredient has to be there to make the Champions League what it is, because otherwise, if it's just faceless guys in tracksuits and it's, setting out teams, we don't get the drama, and it's the drama that makes competition what it is, on top of the fact that it's elite sport, obviously.
Yeah, zeitgeist was the word, and I think everyone was just ready for this type, because you've got your Wengers, the professorial kind of guys who are obviously very, very good, but just maybe a bit dull. And then certainly if you're a British football fan, too many Barry Fries, right?
Yeah.
Just these absolute caricature
Foolish.
guys,
Yeah.
cliche machines. Ferguson's obviously very special, but even by this point, you're talking like a couple of years before, he's saying to the press, "You're all fucking idiots," and kind of losing that. Maybe a wee bit control. It seems old, right? That gaffer thing. Whereas this guy seems to blend personality with smarts, with the kind of academic side to the game, with just this. He had the media eating out the palm of his hand for years, and we were all for it. And this was the arrival. And yeah, he'll be with a different club, but we'll certainly be talking about him next year as he goes for it again, and goals that weren't, and all of that to come. That's 0304, boys. Thank you very much. Cheers, David.
Oh, what a great year.
For the Champions League, for sure. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, terrible for us. Yeah,
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it was good fun.
And plenty more to come. A final that's a wee bit closer than this one. Until then, bye for now. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts, and breakdowns dropping every other day.